นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings. Sometimes you hear people who are new to Buddhism, and particularly who new to Buddhist monasteries, comment that there's a lot of repetitive activities that go on, like there's a lot of bowing. You bow many times a day in a monastery. Even on this retreat, you bow at the beginning of a session, maybe at the end of the session. There's a lot of repetitive chanting. Everybody knows the words Namo Tassa Bhagavato because we recite them often during, say, at the beginning of a Dhamma talk, taking precepts, during the morning and evening chanting, puja, and so on. And there's various other things that just are practiced regularly over and over again. And sometimes the human mind gets bored or used to it, so it just becomes a perfunctory sort of action that you do. Ajahn used to joke, say when the monks get so used to bowing, they no longer bow like up and down 3 times. Because when you become a monk, you're taught to bow with a straight back, put your head down on your forehead down on the ground in front of you, between your open palms, each time you bow, and then you go up to the posture where your back is straight again, you're sitting on your haunches, and then you go down again, bow. But he said after a few years, they go down once and just move their hands a little bit, and they don't even go up again. Lay people probably the same. When you get used to something, then your mind often turns off, doesn't it? And that's the same with obviously life, everything we do in life, but also with meditation, with the practice of, say, mindfulness of breathing. If you've been doing it for many years, or many times, you can sit down with the intention to practice mindfulness of breathing, but your mind is on the breath for a few moments and then off it goes, wandering around, thinking about all the other stuff. If you're thinking about good stuff, that's probably better because it makes you feel happy. It's more peaceful. If you're thinking about stressful things, worries, disappointments, things that annoy you, then all that thinking without mindfulness takes you to a worse place, and you start to mentally feel unhappy. That's reflected in your body. You start to fidget and move around, the less mindfulness and the less awareness you have. So the Dhamma practitioner has this problem. We do a lot of repetitive things, meditating on the same object, listening to Dhamma talks. You listen to a Dhamma talk, even if the Dhamma talk may be giving you a lot of new information, because you've heard Dhamma talks before, you may just turn off, go to sleep, and so on. These are some of the challenges of practicing, and you see it on a retreat, because you can almost go into, dare I say it, zombie mode, where you're just following along, sitting, walking, but the mindfulness is not that clear, not that attentive. So we have to learn how to really put more effort into bringing up mindfulness, paying attention. Sometimes some wise reflection will help with that. You're reminding ourselves what we're doing and why, even if that seems repetitive, because you keep reminding yourself after a while. Nobody likes to be nagged. If you're living in a family or a place with your family and you're being nagged by someone in your family, you don't like it. If you're at work, you don't like to be nagged by your co-workers or your boss. We don't like to nag ourselves in meditation, but sometimes we need to do that, just to bring up some wise reflection to remind us of the instructions, the purpose of what we're doing, some of the aims, remind ourselves of the aims of what we're doing. And listening to Dhamma from external sources can help. And also being with people who are mindful and have been practicing well can also help. With Kalyana Mitta, people who are, we say, good friends, in the sense people who are more committed to the practice and have some understanding and put the principles of the Dhamma into their practice in daily life. When you live with them or spend time with those people, it can bring you up. That's part of the value of Kalyana Mitta. We can be Kalyana Mitta to each other, and if one person's effort is down or they're losing their faith or getting bored with it all, another person who is more committed, more enthusiastic can bring them up. And sometimes we alternate, just like running a marathon or something. There's one person takes the lead for a while, and then another person takes the lead for another period. Kalyana Mitta are like that. Sometimes you're the Kalyana Mitta to your friends, you pull them up. Sometimes your friends are Kalyana Mitta to you and they pull you up. So sometimes the stimulus for the practice to get through some of the obstacles, the dullness, the boredom, the repetition, comes from externals like Kalyana Mitta. Not just teachers, but also just fellow meditators. A few times in the monastery we regularly do all-night meditation sits, and a few times we've had the experience where there's a period in the middle of the night where everyone either goes to rest or is walking meditation because they're so sleepy, and there's only one or two people left in the hall for a period of time. And later on, those meditators who were left in the hall sort of sticking it out have told me that they had the doubt to get up and leave because everyone else was leaving, but because they saw another person meditating, putting effort into their meditation, staying up, they stayed. Seeing this other person trying made them try, put effort into the practice. And one notable occasion, two people were meditating through the night, and in the morning they told me, I could only stay because of this other meditator. They wouldn't leave, so I didn't want to leave. And then I asked the other meditator, and they said, well, I saw the first meditator sitting there, so I didn't want to leave because they were there. So unwittingly or unknowingly, these two meditators helped each other through the whole night. So Kalyana Mitta, friends in the Dhamma, have a role to play in our practice, to remind us of the path and the way to practice, sometimes bring up faith. But then we also have to learn how to do it for ourselves internally, how to bring up more enthusiasm, more patience, more effort. And if you listen to the Buddha's teachings, read the suttas and so on, you'll see that effort, or virya, plays a huge role in training and practicing the Buddhist path. Because we have so many obstacles and attachments to overcome, it requires effort to change a human mind for the better, to learn new things, to develop new habits, new ways of behavior, requires effort. And so it's something you have to keep coming back to in your practice, is how to summon up effort and how to maintain the effort that you've got, as well as refining your understanding of what is right effort. One way we define effort in our practice is the effort to bring up skillful dhammas and maintain them, and the effort to abandon unskillful dhammas, unskillful states of mind, and to prevent them from arising again. And that's one way you can use to describe or understand the kind of effort you're making in your practice. Because sometimes we do try too hard, we push ourselves too hard to the point where we're becoming more miserable through the effort we're making, maybe going without sleep or food or some kind of comfort, and we end up feeling miserable and can't practice because we've pushed ourselves too hard. Probably more common though is not pushing ourselves hard enough, not having enough effort in the first place, or mistakenly thinking just because I'm sitting there following the routine, doing the sit, doing the walk, that I'm making effort. But on a more refined level, effort is a mental quality, and just because your body is sitting there in the meditation posture, or your body is doing the walking meditation up and down, doesn't necessarily mean that you're making much effort with your mind yet. We can also just walk up and down in a very casual way, thinking about all kinds of things, or we can sit without much attention at all, and outwardly it looks like we're meditating, but inwardly we're not making any effort at all and just daydreaming or whatever. So effort, it has to be qualified and it has to be understood internally as well as externally. And then people ask, well, where will your effort come from? Why would you bring up effort to make changes, to put effort into the practice? Well, probably the main conditioning or cause for effort to arise is faith, saddha. Why do we start practicing Dhamma? Well, usually because we have some faith arise in the Buddha and his teachings, and maybe a living teacher we've met perhaps or heard about. We get inspired from external sources first. But then as we practice, real faith arises from our own efforts, seeing the benefit, seeing the results. Gives you a much stronger kind of faith, because it's not just faith in the Buddha and his teachings and in the Sangha, but faith based on one's own experience. It's where the mind and one's experience matches what one's heard, maybe from the Buddha or other teachers. When one's practicing and actually starts to experience some peace and happiness for oneself, then that faith kind of becomes confirmed that it was worthwhile and that there is something good that comes from the practice. And then it's faith combined with some wisdom and understanding, because it's faith based on personal experience. As we know with the qualities of the Dhamma, Pachatang Veditabo Vinyuhi, the Dhamma is to be known individually by the wise. In the end, it's something you have to know for yourself through your practice. And faith tends to become stronger, and a real strength of mind, a real strong quality of mind, when we do put effort into the practice and start to learn and find out for ourselves and experience, particularly when we experience a mind that is more peaceful, more free from stress, then our faith grows because we've known and seen for ourselves. When there's no doubt then. So it's not blind faith, just assuming if I keep meditating I'll become peaceful. Once we've experienced a little bit of peace, then it's not blind faith anymore, it's actual true direct knowledge, isn't it? Oh, my mind feels different than it used to. My mind sees things more clearly. As one teacher said, when you've practiced for a while and you start to learn through experience what is a more wholesome state of mind, and what is a more unwholesome state of mind, and you start letting go of the unwholesome and preserving and developing the wholesome, and you reach a point where you become very clear on that, and you don't waste much time with the unwholesome, unskillful states of mind, because you know they only lead to suffering. You no longer doubt about that. And he said it's like turning a switch on in a previously darkened room. When the room was dark and there was no light, no one turned the light switch on, you can go into the room, but you just can't do anything in there because it's dark, pitch black. You walk around and trip over things, bump into things. But when faith arises, it's like turning the light on, and you start to see things more clearly, see the path of practice, see some of the obstacles as well, but also see some of the solutions and the ways beyond. So faith sattha is often accompanied by another quality we call pasadi. And that has a kind of illuminating quality on the mind. Illuminating because it's not faith entirely based on guessing or just believing blindly in something, but it's balanced by wisdom and understanding. And you can, particularly if you've been practicing for a while and you have some of your own understanding or insight arise, then your faith becomes illuminating to the mind because you realize, oh, this path really works. And it brightens the mind. And it's important to keep returning to the source of your inspiration in the practice, because you need this brightening effect just to kind of get you going in meditation, in every aspect of the Dhamma, keeping precepts, offering dana, everything we do that you might call good practice or part of the path. It all takes effort, and that effort requires some faith, some confidence that it's worthwhile. In the end, we're aiming to get to the point where there's really not much room for doubt anymore, because you just know. No longer just practicing from belief or view, but actually knowing, oh, this is the path, or that is not the path. This is the way to peace and understanding, and that is not. So you have to keep practicing and developing that through your experience, and keep learning from experience. Today in the UK, they're celebrating Lumpur Sumedho's 90th birthday, and he's one of the first living Buddhist monks I met. I did actually meet Ajahn Chah and some of his disciples before I met Ajahn Sumedho, but because I went to Thailand to train in the monastery before I'd met Ajahn Sumedho. But once I had spent time in the monastery, I went back to the UK. I got to know Lumpur Sumedho in the UK back in the early 80s. So I've known him for a long time. And like many people, monks, nuns and lay practitioners, I always found him an inspiring example of somebody really committed to the practice, and somebody who's able to not only explain the practice but pass on some of this faith or commitment to the practice to others, or brighten others. As we say, you can light one candle from another candle, and you can actually light many candles from a single candle. He's somebody a bit like that, who's had his own experience in the practice, strong commitment and done a lot of good, and then managed to inspire other people to do a lot of good in their practice over the years. And he said, but he's just like everyone else. When he began practicing the Dhamma, he didn't have absolute faith, confidence, commitment. He had some, because he had been studying the Buddhist teachings and learning meditation, but he was still full of doubts. And, those doubts gradually dropped away through the practice. You can't expect them to be gone from day one. And nobody's like that. Everyone will have some doubts in the beginning. That's to be expected. So you have to learn how to live with doubt and keep coming back to arouse energy and effort into the practice. And it's from committing to the practice, being willing to try, being willing to do it, that one overcomes the doubt and the faith becomes more established. And he's a very good example of that. His teacher, my teacher as well, Ajahn Chah, also just the same. He's no different. Like some people think a great enlightened teacher like Ajahn Chah or any of the other ones, they kind of must have started from a place where they had no doubts about the practice, and they just sort of started doing it from day one. But I don't think that's true. If you hear what Ajahn Chah and other teachers say about themselves, everyone has doubt, and the way they get through the doubts is through committing to the practice and really trying and learning how to learn from their experience to the point where they've investigated and gone through things thoroughly enough that the doubts drop away. When the doubts drop away, then the commitment is really strong and unshakable. But in the beginning, it has to be developed, has to be put to the test and practiced. There's another monk I know of, Lumpur Juan, who was of the same era as Lumpur Cha and was considered to be an enlightened monk. He's a disciple of Ajahn Mun as well. But when he was a young monk, he said he had the doubt, the thought to disrobe in the first few years of his practice about 3 times. And his father had been a tailor, so he knew how to sew. So he actually 3 times sewed his set of clothes to get ready to do the disrobing ceremony and go back to the lay life. But each time he couldn't go through with it. There was some little voice in his head said, have you really tried enough? Have you really given yourself, surrendered yourself to the Buddhist teachings, to this way of practice or not? And he tried to answer himself honestly, so the answer was, well, no, I haven't. I should really try harder, try more. So he set aside that set of clothes he had, gave them away, and then practiced on for a while longer. But twice more, 3 times overall, he had that doubt. But the 3rd time he gave the clothes away, he didn't use them, he didn't disrobe, and then he never sewed them again. And he's believed to have been an arahant by the time he died. So arahants are not born arahants. Enlightened beings are not born enlightened beings. That comes through the practice, comes through the commitment, and comes through making effort to practice, to train the mind, to the point where the doubts drop away, and then it's much more straightforward, you might say, to keep practicing. Doesn't mean to say there aren't obstacles. Even arahants have obstacles. They still have things they have to meet with in life. Sickness and aging bodies, encountering difficult situations with other people and the world around them. Even an arahant has obstacles. But what changes is the mind. The mind becomes willing to go through anything once the practice has been established and the commitment is there. So this commitment and effort will only come by doing it. It's a kind of conundrum because, how do you get the effort to practice? Well, you practice. through practicing, the effort will come. But how do you get the effort to practice? You just keep going round in circles, you might say. There's nothing for it. Sometimes you use this quality we call adhitthana. You make a resolution or a determination to do something. So like coming on a meditation retreat, you make an adhitthana, I'm going to follow the routine, follow the sessions of meditation, listen to the talks according to the program for the 5 days, I'll just do it. Once you've made your resolution, you commit to that, you just do it. Or keeping 8 precepts, you may have doubts about that before you've done it, but once you undertake to keep 8 precepts for a day and a night or a number of days, you just do it. And it's through the doing of it that you learn. And through doing it, one doubt that drops away is that, it's like this. And hopefully you can do it successfully, so you know yourself, I can do this. You get more confidence in yourself, your own practice. And then whatever obstacles come up, you gradually go through them, move through them. So faith, commitment, effort, energy in the practice is something that grows as you do it. One other aspect that helps is panya, or wisdom, insights, because you learn as you go. And wisdom in Buddhism is often considered like a shortcut, because if you learn something, you understand it, you know it, then it doesn't bother you so much. And really, that's the goal of our practice, is to learn from the lessons that we meet with and learn from the things that teach us. And then what do you gain? Well, you gain wisdom, you gain understanding that stays with you. It's maybe one way to define wisdom. It stays with you, that knowledge, that understanding that stays with you. So maybe you encounter the same thing again, but it doesn't bother you anymore because you know it. Sometimes you have to go through suffering in order to know suffering, but then you know it, so you don't succumb or create that suffering again. One of Ajahn Sumedho's famous teachings is, he used to say, when you reflect on things, you're learning not to make a problem out of things. It's one of his catchphrases I remember, particularly from the early days when he was teaching in the UK. Once you've learned not to make a problem out of something, then it's no longer suffering to you. It could be something as simple as just something like you don't like a person in the place you live or the place you work, or if you're in a monastery there's some person you don't like. You might not be able to remove them from that monastery, but in your mind you can at least not make a problem out of it. So you just learn how to be at peace with this person, their character, the way they do things. Whether it's at work or a family member or in the monastery, it doesn't matter. The important thing is to learn how not to make a problem out of them, because if there's something you can't change in life, you might as well learn to accept it and be with it. Some things we can change, of course, but things we can't change, we have to learn how to be at peace with and not make a problem out of it, meaning not make to an additional suffering or extra suffering out of something. And that's how craving functions, is it? It adds on some suffering to an experience. If that experience is already there, say as a person you associate with for some reason and they're difficult, or they don't like you, or they cause trouble for you or someone you love or something, if you can't get rid of them, they're there, they're there already. At the very least, don't make further suffering by grasping and holding on to all those negative thoughts about them. So not making a problem out of something, in this case, say another person, It also leads on to the reflection of this is the way it is, that's the way they are, that person, that's the way that person is. Or if it's the nature of something, say you're ill, it's the same. Say you're ill and you don't want to be ill, and your illness is discomforting, it's painful, it's inconvenient, it limits you in various ways. But if it's something you can't get rid of, well, you might as well accept that's just the way it is and not make a problem out of it. To do that, you need to reflect, don't you? You need some wisdom to think it through. Even though your initial reaction, say, to illness is painful, say. Nobody likes pain. And it's not that you have to convince yourself that pain is comfortable and good or is not anything unpleasant. Pain will always be unpleasant. But it's more the attitude, the way you think about it is the problem, isn't it? If you keep dwelling on it, I don't like this, I don't want this, and all you're thinking of is how to get rid of it and how to end this pain or this discomfort, then you're making extra suffering, what we call double dukkha, or extra suffering, or you're making a problem out of it. You'll notice we do this all the time, whether it's in meditation, we're meditating and we don't like whatever's coming up in our mind. When is my mind going to drop this thing that I keep complaining about or being unhappy about? When is my life going to improve? When will I get my peace of mind, my samadhi? When will mindfulness improve? Whatever it is that you're bringing up in your mind as you meditate, that's what you have to start being mindful of and not create extra suffering out of. One thing that helps bring up this kind of wisdom where you're not making a problem out of the things that happen in your life or happening around you is reflecting on karma. We say taking responsibility for your karma. If you're ill, well, that's part of your karma. As human beings, we sometimes get ill because human bodies are fragile and subject to illness. Sometimes it's directly created by our own actions. Sometimes it's just the way it is. It's just something that happens in life from the environment or the world around us. But if we can reflect and say, well, this is just the way it is, and not create further suffering by falling into aversion or dwelling on it without much mindfulness or awareness, if we can just learn from it and accept it, then we don't have to suffer anymore. Don't have to have the double dukkha, the double suffering. If it's a person that you associate with or work with or you live with and you can't change them, can't get rid of them, it just makes sense, doesn't it, to make peace with them, to learn to catch your reactions of negativity and drop them, not give them so much energy and not so much importance, because it's only making things worse, it's only making a problem out of the situation. So Luang Por Sumedho used to say, use this as a kind of gatha, like a verse, a reflection or a mantra. As a meditation technique, you say, don't make a problem out of it. If there's really something you can't change, it's just karma, it's something that's coming up into your consciousness, or something you see, or something that you feel, or something that comes your way in your life, you have to accept it, because it's there already. And the important thing is, how are you going to learn from this? How are you going to deal with it wisely, so that you don't make a problem out of it or don't make suffering out of it? A lot of meditation is based around this, in putting wisdom into practice as you face craving that comes up, your reactions to things. It can even work with the other side of the coin, the things you like and desire. Because liking, desire, wanting also creates suffering, because when you don't get what you want, you're not happy. You can't have what you want, you're not happy. Well, again, Don't make a problem out of it. There's something you want. So in the case of meditation, you want to be peaceful maybe. Well, you're not going to get peaceful if you keep making a problem out of this wanting to be peaceful. You're dwelling on that desire. It'll only agitate your mind and be a cause for disappointment more and more. Or if it's something else more worldly, you want to get the job, you want to get the person. Maybe you're single and you want to get a new partner or a partner. Or if you're ill and you want to get healthy again and you want some pleasure, don't make a problem out of it. Just accept, okay, wanting comes up in the mind, but have enough mindfulness to recognize that and don't give it importance, don't give it energy. Just accept it and then let it go. We may not be able to stop craving arising, but we can treat it with mindfulness and wisdom. Both wanting, not wanting, liking, not liking. Sometimes as you meditate, you also can see where your craving really centers. Often we have certain things that are really close to us and that we really attach to. So things we really love. So could be a person, could be an idea, could be some material thing, could be something, some status, something we have in life, some position that we have. And the telltale sign of that is that the amount of suffering that surrounds it. Someone was telling me today about someone they know loves their car more than anything else in the world. You might think, well, that's quite an ordinary thing, but in the case of this person, they love their car so much, they were driving their pregnant wife to the hospital to give birth, and the car broke down. And they didn't want to abandon their car that they loved so much. So they flagged down a car on the road, because they're 30 minutes away from the hospital. They flagged down a car, complete stranger, put their wife, the pregnant wife who's about to give birth, into the car with the stranger and sent them off to the hospital while they stayed and protected their car that they loved so much. And then they gave the wife the instruction, the pregnant wife, who got to the hospital with a complete stranger, got into the hospital. Before she could give birth, she had to ring the mechanic to go and pick up the husband with the car. Our loves can be like that. We become so obsessed with something that we kind of lose all awareness of what's important, perhaps, and sometimes it makes us extremely angry, or sometimes just the attachment is so extreme we forget other things that we should do, forget what our responsibilities are, what our duties are. We do that all the time. That's also making a problem out of something, but in a much more subtle way. You're making a problem, often you usually think about in terms of making a fuss, getting angry, but also just being so attached to something that it blinds you to the importance or the truth of a situation. Can be like that. Ajahn Chah used to joke about meditators. He say, oh, they're very passionate about their meditation. Very passionate about the meditation, put lots of effort in, really want to meditate and become enlightened. But when the bell goes for the meal time, they just forget all about the meditation. Out of the window goes the mindfulness, out of the window goes the wise reflection, and then off they go to eat their meal, because the meal is more important than the meditation. So loves can be just as a basis for attachment as hates as we meditate. But these are all things you learn from. As you meditate, you're learning to reflect on what's going on in your mind, where the craving, where the attachment is coming up. Usually it's what your mind dwells on, isn't it? You make a problem out of something when you dwell on it. You keep thinking about it, you keep returning to it. And the attachment could be so strong it just clouds your judgment, your wisdom disappears, and you just, on autopilot, you react. So if it's something you love and that thing you love is being threatened and you get very upset, angry, could be yourself, could be another person, could be an object. We get very angry when anything invades our space or threatens us. So love and anger are very closely related. Because when you dwell on things with craving and it becomes hardened into attachment, that's where we make problems out of stuff. You know, in the end, everything we know is impermanent, unsatisfactory, not self. Nothing belongs to us. So the reason people become arahants is because they no longer make problems out of things. Everything is just what it is. So there's a few reflections for you this morning. We've still got a bit of time left. I'll leave the talk there and we can meditate quietly to the end of the session.